Now let's talk more directly about implicit bias. And I should first note that I'm drawing heavily, at times verbatim, from the important work of perception.org. Thoughts and feelings are implicit if we are unaware of them or mistaken about their nature. We have a bias when, rather than being neutral, we have a preference for or an aversion to a person or group of people. Thus, we use the term implicit bias to describe when we have attitudes towards people or associate stereotypes with them without our conscious knowledge. A fairly commonplace example of this is seen in studies that show that white people will frequently associate criminality with black people without even realizing that they're doing it. The mind sciences have found that most of our actions occur without our conscious thoughts, allowing us to function in our extraordinarily complex world. This means, however, that our implicit biases often predict how we'll behave more accurately than our conscious values. Multiple studies have also found that those with higher implicit bias levels against black people are more likely to categorize non-weapons as weapons, such as a phone for a gun or a comb for a knife, and in computer simulations are more likely to shoot an unarmed person. In the same way, white physicians who implicitly associated black patients with being less cooperative were less likely to refer black patients with acute coronary symptoms for thrombolysis for specific medical care. And let's note a few characteristics about implicit bias. Here I rely on the work of the Kirwan Institute. They note that first, implicit biases are pervasive. Everyone possesses them, even people with avowed commitments to impartiality such as judges. Secondly, implicit and explicit biases are related but distinct mental constructs. They are not mutually exclusive and may even reinforce each other. In a similar way, the implicit associations we hold do not necessarily align with our declared beliefs or even reflect stances we would explicitly endorse. So, we generally tend to hold implicit biases that favor our own in-group, though research has shown that we can still hold implicit biases against our in-group. And implicit biases are malleable. Our brains are incredibly complex, and the implicit associations that we have formed can be gradually unlearned through a variety of debiasing techniques. The Scientific American magazine adds the following about the evidence for implicit biases. In fact, there's lots of evidence. There are perceptual illusions, for examples, in which white subjects perceive black faces as angrier than white faces with the same expression. Race can bias people to see harmless objects as weapons when they are in the hands of black men, and to dislike abstract images that are paired with black faces. And there are dozens of variants of laboratory experiments that find that most participants are faster to identify bad words paired with black faces than white faces. None of these measures are without limitations, but they show the same pattern of reliable bias as the IAT. There's a mountain of evidence, independent of any single test, that implicit bias is real.